Welcome into CBS News 24/7. I'm Juliette Goodrich. Here's a look at the four big headlines we're following at 4. Another blackout at Newark. We have new audio from the moment air traffic controllers directing planes lose their radar and then tell the pilots to put pressure on the airlines to fix it. Strong words from the new head of FEMA at a town hall with staffers. His warning to anyone that challenges the Trump administration.
And you think those tactics and techniques are going to help you? They will not, because I will run right over them.
The U.S. and China set to hold trade talks this weekend, but could a deal be made? What the president is saying about potentially lowering the tariffs. And it's the first day on the job for Pope Leo, his first mass as the new leader of the Catholic Church, and we're getting reaction from his brothers.
It was like, oh my God, it's Rob. It's never going to be the same.
You know how some kids like to play war and be soldiers? He wanted to play priest.
But first, we begin with air traffic controllers at Newark Airport losing radar again today. The FAA says the outage lost radar for about 90 seconds. CBS News 24/7 streaming obtained audio from the tower.
FedEx 1989, I hand you off here. Our scopes just went black again. If you care about this, contact your airline and try to get some pressure for them to fix this stuff. New York departure now, 120.8.
120.8, sorry to hear about that. FedEx 1989 switching. Good luck, guys.
CBS News correspondent Meg Oliver joining us live from Newark Airport. So, Meg, this is the second time that this has happened in, less than 2 weeks. So we can only ask, what is going on?
Yeah, exactly. That is the million-dollar question, Jules. I can tell you today at Newark, it's not terribly busy, but practically nothing is leaving or arriving on time. At last check, we saw 375 delays today and more than 140 cancellations. As you mentioned, the radar screens went black for the second time in less than a week. This time it happened shortly before 4 a.m. It lasted for 90 seconds. Fortunately, there aren't that many flights en route at that hour, but still, this is terribly concerning to travelers that are flying in and out of Newark. One woman told me this is just simply terrifying. You played that one audio clip. We know that there was another one that went out where a controller can be heard telling a private jet that after having a brief outage, that they were directing them to stay at or above 3,000 feet in case they lost contact during their descent. The first time this happened, that was April 28th, and shortly after that, many air traffic controllers took a leave of absence after that traumatic experience. It has sparked days of uncertainty, delays, cancellations, and we just don't know when is this going to end. That is the big question, Jules.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, taking note, Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy promised improvements in technology after the first outage. So what is the plan? Do we know?
Yeah, so he unveiled this plan yesterday and saying that they were going to invest billions of dollars, not explaining how they were going to pay for it, but that they were going to accelerate hiring air traffic controllers. We know that they are on track to hire at least 2,000 this year. They need 3,500. And they're also looking at a plan to rebuild the aging infrastructure, but that is going to take years. Meantime, the FAA has said that they are going to back up the data lines at the facility in Philadelphia that controls the airspace here in Newark and also add new telecommunication connections, but that's going to take months. So if you're flying in or out of Newark or any of the actually New York airports, we know there are hundreds of delays at JFK and LaGuardia today. This is something that you're going to have to make sure you arrive early, pack a lot of patience, and we're just going to have to take this day by day. I was here on Monday. It was a mess. By Wednesday, things were starting to improve, and here we are ending the week right back where we started.
Yeah, all right. Meg Oliver. Meg, thank you. Trade talks with China officials are set to kick off tomorrow in Switzerland. It comes after President Trump announced a historic trade deal with the UK yesterday, the first deal with a country since he imposed sweeping tariffs on nearly all U.S. trade partners. So let's bring in CBS News White House reporter Willie James Inman. Hi, Willie. So we saw Trump got a head start on those U.S.-China trade talks with a Truth Social post just this morning. What can you tell us?
Hey there, Jules. Good to see you on this Friday. That's right, the president kicking off those negotiations, floating a number, a reduction with those punishing tariffs on Chinese goods. Remember, the U.S. has a 145% rate on most Chinese products. That includes the reciprocal tariff and the fentanyl tariff as well. The president floating on Truth Social, if we could bring that up for our viewers, is saying an 80% tariff on China seems right. And then he goes on to say it's up to Scott B., meaning Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, who is traveling along with Jamieson Greer, the U.S. Trade Representative, to Switzerland to have these meetings with Chinese officials to lay out the U.S. perspective, to hear the Chinese perspective and come to some type of agreement. Now, the president was asked by our own Wei Zhejiang whether or not those conversations would be substantive. He said that would be the case. But also, the press secretary, Caroline Levitt, speaking to reporters earlier today, here's what she had to say about the negotiations.
The president still remains with his position that he is not going to unilaterally bring down tariffs on China. We need to see concessions from them as well. And again, that's part of the reason that Secretary Bessent is going to talk to his Chinese counterparts this weekend to start those discussions in person. As for the 80% number, that was a number the president threw out there, and we'll see what happens this weekend. And always in the effort of transparency, I'm sure you'll hear directly from the Treasury Secretary or the president after those negotiations.
Now, yesterday, in an impromptu quick press conference outside the West Wing, the president talked about that we could potentially see a few different trade deals. Unclear if China would be included in those announcements to come, but we do know via White House officials that India is potentially one of those countries that the White House is close to a trade deal with. But most eyes, and all eyes here at the White House, including the eyes of us reporters as well, is on this deal between the U.S. and China and whether or not they will come to some type of resolution, or if we will see those tariff rates, both on the U.S. and Chinese side, come down, Jules.
Yeah, also, Willie, President Trump floating a tax hike idea for the rich, but it seems like he hasn't really made up his mind. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's right. These negotiations are happening on Capitol Hill to pay for priorities for the Trump administration. That includes immigration, other things that the Trump administration wants. Remember, they have until the end of the fiscal year, the end of September, to negotiate and come up with a spending plan for the next fiscal year. And as part of a way to potentially pay for that plan, there's the idea reportedly that they could potentially see a slight rise in the tax rate, some of the highest earning Americans pay right now. Remember those Trump tax cuts? The president wants to reinstitute those cuts that expire at the end of 2025, but on the high end of that income spectrum, there's the potential talk of raising that rate to pay for some of these needs. Now, the president did post about this on Truth Social earlier today, essentially discussing this and saying that if they were to go forward with this, that the Democrats would somehow blast them in the end. He says the problem with even a tiny tax increase for the rich, and he then goes on to say, which I and all others would graciously accept in order to help the lower and middle income workers, is that the radical left Democrat lunatics would go around screaming, "Read my lips," saying that is part of the message that helped end George H.W. Bush's political career during his re-election campaign. But we did ask, my colleague Nicole Killian asked during the press briefing if the president would support this tax increase, and the press secretary, I should say, had a response to that as well.
Back to the reconciliation bill, can you just clarify the president's position a little bit specifically on the tax issue? Because in his Truth Social post, he said this morning that he would accept even a tiny tax increase for the rich, but then says Republicans probably shouldn't do it, but I'm okay if they do it. So what is it that he wants? Does he want them to increase the tax rates?
The president wants tax cuts, the largest tax cuts in history. He wants to extend his historic tax cuts from 2017, and he wants to see all of the other tax priorities that I just laid out for you included in this bill as well. As for the policy proposal you're talking about, the president has said he himself personally would not mind paying a little bit more to help the poor and the middle class and the working class in this country. I think, frankly, that's a very honorable position. But again, these negotiations are ongoing on Capitol Hill, and the president will weigh in when he feels necessary.
And one of those priorities that the press secretary was alluding to was no taxes on tips. Remember that, Jules? That was that campaign message, that announcement that the president made during the campaign just last year. Most notably, that would likely benefit voters in states like Nevada, which is based on an economy heavily based on tips. So certainly something that we'll continue to monitor and look at as those negotiations play out on Capitol Hill, Jules.
All right, Willie James Inman. Willie, thank you. On to Wall Street now, and the Dow is down as anticipation builds for that icebreaker trade meeting between U.S. and Chinese officials tomorrow. So let's take a look at our interactive stock market heat map brought to you by FinViz. And as you can see, a bit of a mixed bag today. So let's bring in CBS News Money Watch correspondent Kelly O'Grady. Hi, Kelly. Why don't you walk us through what happened in the markets today and what investors are thinking kind of ahead of this trade meeting?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the major indexes, we were kind of all over the map today, but we finished relatively flat. I mean, the NASDAQ was up just ever so slightly. The S&P 500 and the Dow were down just a bit. And this really reflects this tepid optimism going into these trade talks, because of course with that UK trade deal that was announced yesterday, we did see the market rejoice. There was a lot of excitement that maybe this was the beginning of a larger wave of momentum. But I can tell you from the analysts and investors that I've been talking to, the prevailing theme is we need to see more concrete deals. We need to see more numbers that give people a sense of what countries are going to have high tariffs, what countries are going to have low tariffs. What does that mean for businesses and consumers? Because remember, businesses are planning now for months and months in advance. And when you're an investor and you're looking at a public company, that all boils down to the bottom line, the profit. So going into this weekend, I mean, these are trade talks, but even as Willie pointed out, that 80% tariff that the president is suggesting, that's still very, very significant for a business to have to pay. And I'll just close with sort of a context on what that could mean in terms of prices that you and I might see. So there was a study by the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston, and a 60% tariff on China and a 10% tariff on the rest of the world. They expected to see an increase in inflation of 2 percentage points, which where inflation now, that would put that above 4% in the long run. So still pretty significant. And of course, that 80% is above the 60% on China that I just referenced.
Yeah, so now when it comes to the flow of goods and online orders, what kind of tariff impacts are we seeing there?
We're seeing businesses cancel orders significantly. We're seeing a slowdown in imports from China. So in terms of numbers that we're seeing from shipping and logistics companies, anywhere from 30 to 50% of the bookings that you normally see, we're seeing them cancel, specifically from China. And then I was looking at import data, looking at the week starting April 21st versus April 28th. The imports from China were down 43%. That's quite significant. But again, a lot of businesses are looking at their bills and saying, well, I can't pay 145% on top of what I'm paying for these goods themselves. And I'll also highlight, this isn't just an import thing. This is an export thing too. China has retaliated against the U.S. with their own tariffs, and we are seeing exports drop significantly as well.
All right, Kelly O'Grady. Kelly, thank you. Pope Leo leads his first mass. We'll have more on his first day and what is next for the new pontiff. That's next. You're watching CBS News 24/7.
This is breaking news.
Breaking news this afternoon out of Newark. Mayor Ross Baraka has been arrested and is now in ICE custody. Our cameras were rolling outside of Delaney Hall as the mayor was walked out in handcuffs. The news confirmed by the state's top attorney. Earlier this week, Baraka was vocal about being against using the location as a detention center for migrants. U.S. Attorney for the district there, Alina Habba, posted on X, saying the Newark mayor trespassed and ignored warnings from Homeland Security members. Ross Baraka has served as the Newark mayor since 2014 and is currently running for governor.
And that breaking news coming from CBS New York's coverage of Newark's mayor arrested at an ICE detention facility. Pope Leo XIV held his first Mass as head of the Catholic Church this morning. Born in Chicago, he is the first Pope from the United States. During the Mass, he spoke briefly in English.
You have called me to carry that cross and to be blessed with that mission. And I know I can rely on each and every one of you to walk with me as we continue as a church, as a community of friends of Jesus, as believers, to announce the good news, to announce the gospel.
Camillo Baroni, a reporter for the National Catholic Reporter, joins us live now from Rome. Thanks so much for joining us, Camillo. Did the Pope actually give us kind of
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Did we get any insight today on how he might lead the church?
Well, we actually started to have some insights last night. We heard from some cardinals about the dinner that he had with all the cardinal electors and also some cardinal non-electors above the age of 80 years old at Casa Santa Marta, which is the place where they stayed during conclave and where Pope Francis has lived for 12 years, in which he explained to some of them, to some Latin American cardinals, why he chose the name of Leo, getting the inspiration from Pope Leo XIII, a pope that has governed for 25 years the Catholic Church, who brought the Catholic Church from the 19th century to the 12th century during the Second Industrial Revolution. And he explained that the reason why he chose the name could have been to bring more attention on the plight of immigrants, workers, social justice, but also the condition that the new rise of artificial intelligence is bringing to new workers all over the world, but also the homily that he had this morning celebrating Mass with all the cardinals, electors, and non-electors as well in the Sistine Chapel was highly spiritual, with many key theological insights from the 2,000 years old Catholic tradition about the importance of the Church as the real bridge between God and the Catholic people, the Christian people worldwide.
I can only imagine what the last 24 hours has been like for him, and now today is first day on the job. Do we know what his schedule is in the next days and weeks to come?
So we've seen that there's not going to be any official plan tomorrow, so he might just stay here at the Holy See and start doing some work. We heard from sources close to the Vatican. Sunday is going to be his very first Sunday as Pope, and the very big tradition for the first Sundays for popes is going to be a huge blessing called Regina Coeli at 12 p.m. here from the main balcony of St. Peter's Square. And also Monday is going to be a very important day at 10 a.m. He's going to meet with more than 6,000 reporters, producers, and media operators that came here to Rome from all over the world to give his first speech to journalists coming really from every single country of the world. That's going to be probably a key meeting that we should follow, because that's the same meeting in which Pope Francis disclosed so many details about the conclave that elected him as Pope Francis in 2013. We don't know how much Pope Leo XIV does want to disclose and to inform the general public about it. It depends on his personal style. We still have to check on that, but it's definitely going to be a very important meeting. And then we know that Sunday, May 18, it's going to be the main day in which he's going to celebrate the first big Mass in St. Peter's Square as Pope, the inthronization, and we don't have yet a detailed list of the heads of states and governments and king and queens from all over the world, but we should expect many of them.
Yes, a very important day. Camillo Baroni, thank you so much. And stay with CBS News 24/7 for continuing coverage of the new Pope. You can also get all of our reporting online at cbsnews.com. A federal judge ordered the release of Rumeysa Ozturk, an international student detained by ICE after the Trump administration revoked her visa. The underlying cause for the detainment was an opinion piece that she co-authored about Israel's war with Hamas. The judge who granted Ozturk's bail said she raised serious concerns about her First Amendment and due process rights. The legal director for ACLU Massachusetts spoke about the order after the hearing.
One of the dangers of what we were seeing in the government's behavior in this case is the very strong message it sends to people who are watching that you can be punished by your speech. And what we heard from the court today was confirmation that that is not what we do in this country.
That's right.
That the First Amendment protects your right to speak. It protects your ability to remain at liberty and free.
The judge also said there was no concern that Ozturk was a flight risk or a danger to the public in his decision to grant her bail. The United States is expected to receive and aid white South Africans who were granted refugee status starting Monday. The Trump administration alleges they face racial discrimination in post-apartheid South Africa. It also claims they face racially motivated seizures of land by the South African government, which has strongly denied any land confiscations or discrimination. All right, let's get to a live look at LAX now. Get ready for the heat. Southern California could see record-breaking temperatures. So meteorologist Darren Peck joining us in studio now. Boy, the map is saying it all right now, just the colors.
A lot of deep reds on the map.
Reds, yeah.
Yeah, and the shot we were looking at from LA was at the airport. You see the marine layer, that cool, wet gray blanket at the beach?
Yeah.
It's going to be 79 degrees in downtown LA on Saturday. That's going to tie the record for them.
Yeah, that is.
I mean, it says a lot about LA's climate and this time of year. 79 degrees might not grab your attention, but look at the map back there. Several years ago, the National Weather Service started messaging heat-related health concerns using this format. It's a real quick visual snapshot. You get into the areas of orange, like most of LA and Southern California, all the way down to San Diego, there's a moderate level of heat-related health. You got to pay attention, but it's not overly concerning. Look at the reds. That's like out towards the Inland Empire, Southern California, down towards like Coachella and the Imperial Valley. These areas in red have a high degree of heat-related health risk. They need to pay attention. Come back to the virtual map with me. Watch how the temperatures are going to change over the course of the next couple of days. If we visualize what the temperature spread looks like here through the southwestern U.S., and then animate it, what happens over the next 24 hours is you see those deep shades of red go so deeply shaded into the red that they start going into kind of like this smoky white, and this is for Saturday. So the peak heat's coming tomorrow. That record for LA, that happens tomorrow at 79. It's going to be 96 in Burbank, by the way. And anybody who's ever flown into the LA basin, those two airports are not far apart from one another. Just so happens that Burbank is in the San Fernando Valley, and it feels the heat a little more. That's the concern here for the next 2 days. Anybody in that part of the country should just go easy on yourself, especially if you are farther inland. There's one other thing on here which stands out on the map, and that's the fact that we've got this big blossom of clouds over the same place we were looking at it yesterday. There's going to be another round of steady rain here, and if we just clear off the clouds, I'll put the Futurecast in here, which takes us through Sunday. Look how this thing stalls out. It'll keep raining. Over this part of the country, you've already had like 4 to 5 steady days of it here. You got to get through Sunday, and it will pick up a little bit in intensity, Juliet. On Sunday, they'll see a little bit heavier rain with that, too.
All right. So all over the spectrum now.
Yeah.
Heat and rain.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Darren.
See you later.
Appreciate it. New developments in the jury selection in the high-profile trial of Diddy Combs. What happened in court? That's next. You're watching CBS News 24/7. Our monitors take us to New York as attorneys for Diddy Combs leave court. And today, a judge granted their request to delay the final step in the jury selection process for the rapper's sex trafficking trial. Now the jury of 12 New Yorkers won't be decided until early next week. So let's bring in attorney and legal analyst Eric Guster. Thanks for joining us again. Appreciate all of your insight. This time, let's talk about the jury selection and what it means now for this delay in the trial.
The judge and the attorneys are afraid that these jurors will get cold feet because this is the biggest trial that they've ever been a part of and one of the biggest ones of the year. And they're afraid that over the weekend, some jurors are going to go home and their husband's going to look over their glass and say, "Are you sure you want to do this?" And then they'll just not show up the next day, not show up Monday. So they want to make sure that when they bring them in Monday, that these jurors are going to be there for the whole week. They're going to be part of the trial throughout the duration, and they're going to listen to the case.
Aha, are they committed? Okay. And what is the prosecution's strategy?
The prosecution's strategy is to show Diddy forced these sex parties. He forced people into almost sex slavery through financial means and other things. And also one big issue that he has is transporting the sex workers over the state lines. That is like a catch-all, kind of like tax evasion, where they may not be able to get you on the really bad stuff, but get you on the technicality. So they want to show that Diddy forced people to have sex, held them without their will, and he's guilty of all of these crimes.
Let's talk about another lawsuit that's been filed against singing legend Smokey Robinson. Attorney John Harris talked about the accusations that he's facing, so let's take a listen.
The principal causes of action against Mr. Robinson, in particular, are sexual battery, assault, false imprisonment, gender violence, and creating a hostile work environment. Our four clients have a common thread. They're Hispanic women who were employed as housekeepers by the Robinsons, earning below minimum wage.
Okay, so all four women employed by Robinson filing this lawsuit. Now, I'm curious, where does the case stand right now, and can you talk a little bit about this lawsuit?
The lawsuit is a very tough one for the defense on this one. When you have multiple people who are testifying to very similar circumstances, they were all immigrants. They were flying under the radar with immigration. They were probably forced to work at below minimum wage, like some immigrants are taken advantage of. And now you have people who are afraid of this very powerful man and his wife, that they are afraid to call the police, which we see a lot of that in the immigrant community. So now they have a voice, their lawyers saying, hey, these people were abused, they were mistreated, they were sexually assaulted, and now let's get them justice. So it's a very tough battle for the defense of Mr. Robinson.
Because of the numbers, is that right? Because of all four filing this?
Yes, when you have multiple people filing and it's saying that their stories are the exact same, you're going to be able to corroborate it. See if they told someone, see if they told a relative, see if they sent text messages about what happened, or possibly reported to someone who was not necessarily the police. And if they get corroborating stories over the years, that is very, very tough for them to overcome, because once they show that there's a pattern of abuse by 1, 2, or even 4 of them, then Smokey Robinson, he might get smoked.
Yeah, okay. And I do understand that Smokey Robinson's wife is also part of this lawsuit. So she allegedly knew about what was going on.
My law firm handles cases similar to this, and the wives always know. If a person lives with someone that's been around them for multiple years, they know that these things are happening in many instances. And in this particular case, in the lawsuit of the 4 women, they're saying that the wife was part of it, that she was part of the actions, told them that they couldn't do anything, that they were helpless, and they had to do exactly as they said. So now she's liable. She's possibly liable for their actions as well.
All right, we'll continue to follow this, and thank you so much for your insight on both those cases. Eric Guster, good to see you.
Good to see you.
President Trump's pick to serve as U.S. Surgeon General sparking some backlash. What we know about the wellness influencer next. You're watching CBS News 24/7. Acting FEMA Administrator David Richardson issued a striking warning to members of the nation's disaster relief agency. CBS News has obtained exclusive video of Richardson's speech on his first day at FEMA, so take a listen.
I don't need very much authority to get everything done I need to do. I don't need the full title. All I need is the authority from the president to put me in here as some degree of acting, and I will make sure that his intent gets completed. I don't stop at yield signs.
Joining us now is Homeland Security correspondent Nicole Skanga. So, Nicole, what else did the FEMA administrator say during this speech?
Juliet, good to be with you. This is a 17-minute-long speech that was given to thousands of FEMA personnel, both at FEMA headquarters in Washington, D.C. and throughout the country, that current FEMA employees described to me as being unhinged, terrifying and threatening. And Juliet, during his address, he told FEMA employees, quote, "I and I alone speak for FEMA." He went on to say that he has never read a book on leadership before, but is fine operating in chaos. The former Marine also warned his new coworkers not to get in his way as he works to reform and reduce the size of this agency. Take a listen.
There's somewhere south of 20% that decide that they are going to get in the way of change. You can ask anybody that those 20% of the people are a problem. And they have to be sidelined. So don't get in my way if you're those 20% of the people. I know all the tricks, okay? I know them from lance corporals. I know them from staff sergeants, lieutenants, federal employees, my own employees, and indeed myself, okay? I played the games too. Obfuscation, delay, undermining. If you're one of those 20% of the people and you think those tactics and techniques are going to help you, they will not, because I will run right over you. I will achieve the president's intent.
And Richardson also said in that address that he's working to figure out how to push some of FEMA's responsibilities down to the states. Of course, that is a concern among lawmakers and state leaders who fear they won't be able to deal with crisis management on their own, to deal with all the natural disasters that FEMA tackles day in and day out. Keep in mind that FEMA is an organization that declares a major disaster emergency every other day, and we are roughly 3 weeks ahead of the start of Atlantic hurricane season.
So what else do we know about David Richardson? We do know he was a former Marine corporal. What else about his background?
Yeah, that's right. He was the former assistant secretary at DHS, working in an acting capacity at the Countering Weapons of Mass Destruction office, but he has no real experience at FEMA or in disaster relief management. He was a former Marine, as you noted. He commanded artillery units. He served in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Africa. He says in his bio on the Department of Homeland Security's website that he participated in Marine Corps martial arts. He also referenced his military experience frequently during his address to staff today. Take a listen.
Doing things outside of a mission can be very tragic. I've had friends who are either dead physically or very damaged emotionally because they ran into trouble doing things that were not within their mission during combat.
And one current FEMA employee told me that listening to this address felt like he'd suddenly been, recruited to join the armed forces, that this language that Richardson put forth might be commonplace on the battlefield, but it came across as really aggressive to this civilian federal agency filled with employees that are used to not deploying to war, but deploying to hurricanes. Juliet.
All right, Nicole Skanga. Nicole, thank you. Last month, Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. announced he wanted to find the root cause of autism. Now the National Institutes of Health said it would use information from Medicare and Medicaid to help determine the cause. The plans are concerning to both the autism community and privacy experts. They're worried about how this data will be used. So CBS News medical contributor Dr. Celine Gounder joining us live now. Thanks so much for being here. What exactly is this project and why is it drawing scrutiny?
The idea here is to draw data, pull data from Medicare and Medicaid, both electronic health records as well as medical billing claims, and then also incorporating information from pharmacies and even potentially from wearable devices. And when you think about what kind of data that is, it may have the potential to show what's happening in terms of autism diagnoses, treatment, disparities in access to care. It's not necessarily going to be able to tell you what causes autism.
So supporters say it is a big leap forward for research. Critics are raising alarms. So what are their main concerns?
Well, when you're talking about pulling this much detailed information about people, even if you do not include their names, that amount of information about a person, and not to mention you have AI potentially on top of that, you may be able to connect the dots and figure out who that person is. And many privacy experts are concerned that this could be used to create a registry of people who have autism, and that in turn could lead to discrimination with respect to health care or any number of other issues.
What about the science? Could this actually help uncover the root causes of autism?
Well, the problem here is that it's not going to include, for example, genetic testing on everybody. It's not going to include collecting information on environmental exposures. You would have to actually do the genetic test on everybody for that test result to be in the electronic health record. We don't test everybody for mutations that we think might be associated with autism. We don't, for example, and this is just one of the many hypotheses, microplastics might be a driver here potentially. We don't collect information on everybody's exposure to microplastics, both when they were in utero, prior to birth, and then later during life. And so if you don't have that kind of information in the database, you can't study those questions.
So Dr. Casey Means, a wellness entrepreneur aligned with Health Secretary Kennedy, has been nominated to serve as the next U.S. Surgeon General. So what is the story behind this pick?
So she's best known for her company, which provides continuous glucose monitoring. So that's basically monitoring your blood sugar levels in real time. She also has built a huge social media following. She has a best-selling book called Good Energy. So she's known as a social media influencer. Now, I do want to note that she also let her medical license lapse in 2019. And some of both President Trump as well as Secretary Kennedy's supporters have actually mentioned this, saying that they do not think she is qualified for the job. And just as somebody who was myself working on the front lines during the pandemic, to have let your license lapse in 2019, not to have renewed it when there was a definite need for clinicians, it was a all hands on deck moment. For somebody who's going to potentially be our Surgeon General, not to have renewed their license since then is quite troubling.
So some of her views have sparked controversy. Can you talk about that?
Well, if she's confirmed, she would be the most food-focused Surgeon General that we've ever had. But she's also expressed some skepticism about vaccines, about birth control. She's also made money promoting unproven supplements, which is all quite concerning, especially when she's also said she wants to take on big food and big pharma, that she would have made money off of promoting supplements. And as I mentioned earlier, there is some concern even among Trump supporters and Kennedy supporters, like the conservative influencer Laura Loomer, that she is not qualified. And so if even the president and the secretary's supporters are questioning her qualifications, it's unclear whether she will get confirmed.
All right, Dr. Celine Gounder, thank you. Well, the FDA just approved the first at-home collection device for cervical cancer screening. It is called the Teal Wand from Teal Health. Patients can collect a sample themselves in the privacy of their home and then mail it to a lab to be tested. Teal Health says it's just as accurate as getting a sample collected and sent by a doctor's office. All right, to the White House now, where Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller says the White House is, quote, actively looking at suspending the writ of habeas corpus as it looks to carry out its immigration agenda. So habeas corpus is a legal procedure that gives people the right to challenge the legality of their detention.
President Trump has talked about potentially suspending habeas corpus to take care of the illegal immigration problem. When could we see that happen, do you think?
Well, the Constitution is clear, and that, of course, is the supreme law of the land, that the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus can be suspended in a time of invasion. So I would say that's an option we're actively looking at. Look, a lot of it depends on whether the courts do the right thing or not. At the end of the day, Congress passed a body of law known as the Immigration and Nationality Act, which stripped Article 3 courts, that's the judicial branch of jurisdiction over immigration cases. So Congress actually passed, it's called jurisdiction stripping legislation. It passed a number of laws that say that the Article 3 courts aren't even allowed to be involved in immigration cases. Many of you probably don't know this.
And we're continuing to follow this story. We'll update you if we hear more on this. We hear from the brothers of Pope Leo XIV, their reaction when they found out their sibling is now the new leader of the Catholic Church. Next. You're watching CBS News 24/7. That's the sound of Pope Leo XIV holding his first Mass, one day after becoming the first ever American Pope in history. Across the world in Chicago, Leo's brother, John Prevost, talked about his reaction to his younger brother being selected as Pope.
I was sitting in the living room reading a book. I got a message from a former teacher that said there's white smoke. So I went down to put the TV on to watch it, and then I saw it, and I called my niece to say, hey, she said she's watching it also, so we were watching it and wondering at what point would the curtains open. So maybe 45 minutes later, she said, look, the curtains are moving, and sure enough, they moved, and they opened, and out came the bishop from France. She was screaming about it. Is this for real? She said, I'm going to call work. I'm not going in today. And I said, well, whatever it takes. And then we just listened and watched the people in the crowd and listened to his speeches, because he didn't say a whole lot in English. He used Spanish and Italian, so we didn't get a whole lot, but there were some subtitles. And then off went my phone, off went the cell phone, off went the iPad. Everything went off at the same time.
The internet wasted no time making jokes after learning the new Pope, Leo XIV, was born in Chicago. In fact, Google search traffic for "Da Pope" has increased since the announcement. The Wrigleyville-based Obvious Shirts company shared an image of a Chicago Bears-themed shirt in honor of the Pope. It looks similar to the former coach Mike Ditka's iconic sweater. Chicago's baseball teams are arguing over the Pope loyalty. The Cubs posted an image of Wrigley Field with the screen reading, "Hey Chicago, he's a Cubs fan." Hours later, the White Sox posted an image of the screen at their field saying, "Hey Chicago, he is a Sox fan" on Instagram. So they followed up with a clip of Pope Leo XIV's brother saying he was never a Cubs fan. And they even posted a picture of a Sox jersey that said Pope Leo on the back. Oh, they're getting serious. All right, when you think that you've heard it all, listen to this. A raccoon was caught holding a meth pipe, that's right, meth pipe, during a traffic stop in Springfield Township, Ohio. Check it out.
Hello?
The raccoon has her meth pipe.
Has what? Oh my God.
Her meth pipe. He's playing with the meth pipe right now. No, don't reach for it. That's evidence now.
Oh, I don't want him to have that.
That's why I'm going to do it. Hey, buddy.
Huh?
It's okay.
Okay, you're on orange. He'll be here in 2 minutes. I'm right across from my house. Is that what that is? A few minutes?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is what she's smoking meth in.
Okay.
The raccoon's playing with her meth pipe.
All right.
Oh, there's no way. He's trying to smoke it.
All right. Thanks.
There's no way. All right, enough fun and games.
Here. Again?
Holy hell.
Huh?
Oh.
Yeah, he's on his way here.
Keep an eye. She was trying to take the meth pipe out of the car. Just keep an eye on her real quick.
Wow, you just never know what you're going to get when you're recording. And for more interesting content like this, check out our TikTok and Instagram pages. For the record, the raccoon is just fine. All right, America Decides is next. Nancy Pelosi joins Major Garrett to talk about the new Pope and much more. And we leave you now with a live look at the White House, where the Trump administration and China will hold trade talks this weekend. It comes after the president announced a historic trade deal with the UK yesterday, the first deal with a country since he imposed sweeping tariffs on nearly all U.S. trade partners. You're watching CBS News 24/7.